Hello, welcome to my presentation, which is titled Home Amongst Right Angles, Cube Living. This presentation was adapted based off of a paper, which will be released later in the year. This presentation was created for the Livable Cities AMPS conference in New York, which is held from June 14th to June 16th, 2023. This presentation was created by me, Shannon King, who is an independent scholar currently, and I am also a recent alumni of University of Toronto, and I had studied the English and art/art history programs. Housing availability and affordability issues have been continuous for much of human history, and the architects who seek to rectify these issues have been designing continuously in search of a solution that could even have utopian implications. In the Czech Republic, a strikingly new yet historically inspired prefabricated home was conceptualized by HSH architects in 2001, and the prototype project was realized between 2002 to 2004. The house is made of a steel skeleton with concrete and glass panels. The building is comprised of 24 cubes, and each cube is a uniform 3 meters by 3 meters. The architects have approached breaking up the home into clearly defined areas. Quote, each of the cubes form a separate unit with its own function. There are implications of functionalism, as every cube exists for a reason. This is very provocative considering many people feel pressured and socially obligated to own a 3,000 square foot house with half the rooms rarely entered. This presentation will examine how the villa in Baronne organizes and simplifies space and how it engages with materiality, while considering how it differs compared to Buckminster Fuller's historical designs and new brutalist aesthetics. The design of this home has taken elements from what may appear to be an unlikely source. The architect referred to this design as an, quote, imaginary three-dimensional chessboard, end quote, which shows a playful approach to architecture while considering its mobility. Comparing a building to a type of game is an idea that complicates housing, but has been done before. Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion has a pointed structure atop the home that strikingly resembles a spinning top. Fuller suggests and wonders if buildings could move and spin, which creates irony and merrily questions the viewer's expectations of what a home entails. The image of a top may invoke a childhood carefree attitude and remind the viewer of movement. A spinning top is a whimsical toy that can be played, without restrictions or formal parameters to the game. The villa in Baronne draws inspiration from a very different type of game, chess, which has associations with numerous rules, yet this design does not give off a bureaucratic air. It remains looking convivial and open. The villa has multiple similarities to the lower two-thirds of the Dymaxion. The villa and the Dymaxion both use shades of gray and black with geometric shapes and lines. The Dymaxion has a large central window as a key design component. The villa features multiple. The villa relatively adheres to typical conventions of housing domiciles, being shaped loosely around squares and rectangles, but it is taken to the extremes. The Dymaxion is hexagonal, which makes it appear alien-esque and imaginably strange to organize the interior. The form of the Dymaxion simply looks like an object, a geometric top with a smidgen of abstraction rather than a dwelling or a home space. The cubed forms of the villa in Baronne does not follow the logic of a chess game, and it does not visually immediately remind the viewer of a chessboard. The villa does not follow the typical alternating grid of black and white pattern of chessboards, but takes on a randomized sequence that is more reminiscent of Tetris pieces. The shape of the concrete in the right half of our first image may depict a chess move, specifically the way the knight game in pieces moves in an L shape. This could be the architects aligning knightly qualities with their design or a simple coincidence. The prototype villa has 24 squares while a chessboard has 64 squares. These numerous small choices to remove and thus differentiate the architectural design from the object that inspires it allows it to take on an identity of its own. Villa in Baronne manages to not overtly look like an object, a chessboard, by its clear steel structure and furniture revealed through the glass, contextualizing and reminding that it is indeed a home-dwelling space. There is a futuristic sleekness to the form that echoes parts of Fuller's aesthetics. I interpret the villa in Baronne as having drawn inspiration from Fuller because of the playful approach to design that references games and similarities in formal structure with the Dymaxion. The issue of large-scale production of housing was investigated by Buckminster Fuller and HSH architects using completely clashing approaches. The villa prototype was created alongside HSH's architects' imaginings for wide-scale mass production, using the cubes to create a large square grid. This architectural plan shows a clear choice not to be a rectangle, as the majority of large-scale contemporary mouse housing structures, the skyscraper apartment buildings we commonly see, are. The motif of the cube is shown extending somewhat exponentially, suggesting more cubes could be added. The plan for the skeleton of the grid structure does not differentiate between separate families' spaces. Hypothetically, HSH architects could use their cube-centric design to create a variety of shapes of structures which could be customizable. The design by HSH architects is visually organized according to functionality rather than having a predetermined shape and function like Fuller's prefabricated designs. The model of a neighborhood of Dymaxion houses shows geometric placement and walkways to link the community. Suburbia with identical houses stretching for blocks would undoubtedly be confusing, easy to lost in, and subjectively dystopian. Fuller's plan also antiquatedly assumes access to large areas of land and space between each dwelling that is rarely available affordably in the 21st century. Fuller provided groundwork in conceptual paper architecture and some created works which influence aspects of HSH architects' design. And you can see in my note here, paper architecture takes this name because they are architectural designs that are utopian or dystopian in nature. So there is little belief that they will ever actually become actual buildings and get realized. Hence, their architecture that stays on the paper, that's the name paper architecture. The villa could be as solid as its materiality suggests, or it can take on malleability. Quote, square fields are defined as needed by fixed or sliding walls. No distinction is made between individual fields, and their character is determined purely by their contents, end quote. The rooms can be altered alongside spontaneous developments in life. This allows for the structure to be altered as the family grows and changes. If a new baby is born or if an elderly relative needs to move in, the walls of the structure itself will mold to fit their needs. This shiftable aspect of the HSH architect's prototype does not expect the consumers of their design to have their entire life planned out upon the purchasing of their home, as many current real estate practices require. This is a massive advantage to their design ideology and technology. Quote, With cheap, cool electric lighting, mechanical ventilation, central heating, and the versatility of concrete structure, rooms can be whatever size and shape was needed. The building could fit around the functions rather than the functions having to accommodate themselves to the normal restrictions of buildings. End quote, which was said by Barnabas Calder, the author of Raw Concrete, The Beauty of Brutalism. If a newlywed couple spends years undergoing the planning and saving process for home ownership and then finally buys a conventionally made traditional three-bedroom house, they cannot alter their decisions if their perceptions or desires change with time. For example, if they suddenly want 5 kids, no kids, or want to invite their in laws to move in, etc., at least not without extensive preparations. The issue of family sizes fluctuating throughout life cannot be denied or ignored when designing sustainable architecture. Across the housing market in all corners of the world, there are quote unquote empty nesters with a house full of empty rooms after their children move out as they enter adulthood. What does a middle-aged couple then need or do with a few extra bedrooms? This empty nester dilemma leads to couples and families moving houses throughout their lifetime. Contemporary standardized housing and even Fuller's designs have not been created to grow with its inhabitants, and that is a massive oversight in long-term utility. The organization of alternating glass and concrete panels has possibilities for outside surveillance, especially if a prototype was installed in a city. Passerbys would be able to view the entirety of certain rooms. In this image of the prototype home, the room exposed by a glass wall at the top of the structure reveals a black bathtub basin. This could imply the dwellers of the specific villa have a scenic view before them or that the neighbors are a distance away. This is a startling difference from many contemporary homes with small windows that usually have their blinds drawn mere feet apart from their neighbors. When using transparent material as a wall, the social impact must be considered. If the prototype for the villa in Baronne was mass-produced, would every building contain the same amount of exposed and covered rooms? To engage in discourse surrounding concrete-based architecture, definitions must be touched upon. Rainer Banham defines the movement, New Brutalism, in 3 theses. Number 1, memorability as an image. Number 2, clear exhibition of structure. Number 3, valuation of material as found. The relationship between the Villa in Baronne and the New Brutalist movement will be examined through these parameters. The villa commands viewers to take a long, hard stare at the structure. The building deviates from contemporary architectural norms in several regards that gives it a memorable quality. The structure of the villa is clearly defined, almost outlined in black as it recedes through the home. The glass and concrete walls, floors, and ceilings announce themselves as a crucial part of the design. The HSH architects have rejected huge slabs of concrete to instead alternate with glass and black steel. This stops the building from leaving the impression of an imposing monolithic fortress. The form being broken up by the black linearity gives sophistication to the design. The cubes stacked atop and next to each other come together into a rectangle. The interior of the house consists of largely rectangles and squares receding into space. Both the interior and exterior of the design have geometric features, which creates a sense of unity. The Baronne villa's interior has sparse walls with angular shapes in each cube, yet because of how the black skeleton is exposed against the concrete, it creates a feeling of spaciousness and depth rather than emptiness. The materials of the villa in Baronne are acknowledged, celebrated, and is what makes the design so successful. As Barnabas Calder fondly explains, quote, "The uniform sobriety of concrete turns out, when you look at it more closely, to conceal a subtle gamut of textures, colors, beautiful in themselves and a permanent record of how the building was made." End quote. The concrete of Villa in Baronne almost looks like a Rothko painting. with its ambient effect on the eye. No two panels of concrete is exactly identical, and the artist's hand, or the hand of the worker, could be suggested. The texture and slight variations in shades of the concrete is vastly accentuating the design. The villa adheres to Banham's criteria for new brutalist aesthetics. Naturally, different art historians define what terminology entails differently. This statement, quote, brutalism is a controversial muscular term for a controversial muscular style, end quote, led me to ponder. Is this true for the Barone Villa? Whether such a subjective term like masculinity can be applied to the Barone Villa is debatable, but the aesthetics look very neutral. The masculinity of a warehouse-like or fortress-like building is not present in the Barone Villa. There are no militaristic or battle-ready implications in the design. The lack of architectural ornamentation could be shallowly interpreted as unfeminine at a glance, but the warmth of the wood in the interior and the cool-toned, almost blue-gray concrete comes together to create a truly genderless building. The villa in Barone was influenced and inspired by New Brutalist aesthetics and the ideas of Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion. The inspiration from toys and the geometric shape is inspired by the Dymaxion. This prototype residence modernizes brutalist materials and aesthetics to suit 21st century sensibilities and tastes. The HSH architects took a formulaic approach to design where functionality could be constrained in a uniform cube, but the walls still have the potential for adjustability. A building designed to go through repurposings has more potential to last entire lifetimes and adapt to mass production. Villa in Barone adheres to Banham's criteria to be a new brutalist structure, but it deviates in appearance from traditional historical brutalist works. The color scheme of the grid and walls allows the structure to look open, friendly, and neutral, rather than a hostile, closed-off fort of concrete. And I would like to thank you for listening to this presentation, and please feel free to look me up if you're interested in any more of my independent scholarship. Have a great day.